everyone, you're welcome to Kharis tutorials today. My name is Simeon Grace. Today, I'll be taking you a series of lessons on how to take body measurements. We're going to take measurements of a blouse, a skirt, a gown. I have a friend here with me that is going to assist me in doing that. First, we are going to start with a straight blouse measurement. The first thing to take is the length. In taking the length of your straight blouse, you first take the under bust measurement, then you take the full length. The under bust measurement here is 13.5 and the full length is 24. After the length, we take the shoulder measurement. Now, the shoulder measurement has to be from one shoulder point to the other shoulder point. From one shoulder point to the other shoulder point. So I have 14. After taking the shoulder measurements, the next thing is the sleeve. From the shoulder point, I'll take my sleeve measurements. Now we have the cap sleeve, the short sleeve, the 3/4 sleeve, and we have the full length sleeve, the long sleeve. After the sleeve, we take the round sleeve. This is the round sleeve for the cap sleeve. If it is a short sleeve, then I'll have this as my round sleeve. If it is a 3/4 sleeve, I will have my upper arm, then I will have below the elbow, I'll take the round sleeve. Now, if it is a long sleeve, I'll take the upper round sleeve, the lower arm, then the wrists. Now, in taking the wrists measurements, it has to be in such a way that it will be easier to pull the sleeve. It should not be too tight. Should not be too tight. Like here, it's still normal if I have 7.5. But considering the fact that she will have to pull her dress, then I have to increase the round sleeve measurements. After the round sleeve measurements, we now move to the bust measurements. We take the round bust measurements, after which we take the band measurements. Then after the band measurements, we move to the waist measurements. The waist measurements. Then we are done with the measurements of a blouse, a straight blouse. Now, if you want to take a measurement for a peplum top or a gathers top, any top that will be having an half length, the only difference between this and the straight blouse is when you are taking the length of your blouse, first take the under bust measurement, then you take the half length before taking the full length. That is only the difference between the straight blouse and the other peplum, either peplum blouse or a gathers blouse. In as much you need the half length, then you have to take the under bust measurements, the half length before the full length. Then we are done with the measurements of a blouse. Now we move to the measurements of a short skirt. The first thing here is the length. Starting from the waist to the knee length. That is the length. After which, you take the waist measurements. Now, this has to be firm. It has to be firm because it's going to hold the waist of the skirt. So, we have the waist measurements. After the waist measurements, we have the hip measurements. The hip measurements, and we are done with the measurements of a short skirt. So now we move to the measurements of a long skirt. Here, the only difference between the short skirt and the long skirt is the length. In taking the length measurement, first we have to take the upper knee, that is before the knee. You're going to note it. Here I have 18. Then I have the full length. I have the full length to be 40. That's just the difference. First, you get the knee length, which is the upper knee. Then you get the full length of the skirt. After which, you take the waist and the hip. And we are done with the measurement of a long skirt. Now we move to the measurement of a short gown. Here, the difference between a short gown measurement and the blouse, a straight blouse measurement also is the length. First, we take the underbust measurement, then the full length of the gown. The underbust, then the full length of the gown. After which, you take the shoulder measurements, like I said earlier. From the shoulder point, you take the sleeve, either the cap sleeve, the short sleeve, the 3/4 sleeve, or the long sleeve. After that, you take the round sleeve. Then we have the bust, the band, the waist. Now, because this is a gown, definitely we're going to include the hip measurements. So we have the bust measurements. We have the bust measurements. We have the band measurements. We have the waist measurements. And then the hip measurements. And we are done with the measurements of a short gown. The last but not the least is the measurement of a long gown. Also, the difference between the short gown and the long gown is just the length. We have the underbust. We have the upper knee measurements. That is before the knee. Then we have the full length of the gown, the underbust measurements, the upper knee, then the full length of the gown. After which, we continue with the shoulder, the sleeve, the round sleeve, the bust, the band, the waist, and the hip. And that brings us to the end of measurements taking. We've come to the end of our measurements taking. I'm sure by now you know how to take your measurements accurately. I still remain Simeon Grace. Thanks for watching Kharis tutorials. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, HoAfricaTv. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Kharis Kreations. Also, don't forget to download my song. The link is on the description below. Till I see you next class. Bye.
Hello.